Lower revenue collection is likely to dominate discussions when Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana presents this year's national budget. This is against mounting spending pressures on the fiscus, such as expenditure on social grants, with millions of South Africans dependent on some kind of government grant. Experts believe the Finance Minister will continue to show expenditure restraint as far as possible, but state-owned companies such as Eskom and Transnet, as well as the public sector wage bill, will continue to receive a considerable share of the fiscus.
The domestic economic environment is riddled with challenges and uncertainty, dampening investor confidence. The weak global economy, geopolitical tensions, as well as local challenges like the load shedding, the high cost of living, and the sluggish investments have choked growth over the past few years. The slow implementation of reforms, climate change, the political uncertainty are also weighing on the economy. Current projections by experts put economic growth for this year at about 1%. Not enough to create jobs needed to reduce the high levels of unemployment or to significantly grow the tax base to raise the much-needed revenue.
We do have our local challenges, and they continue to persist, particularly the supply side constraints to growth. In the electricity sector, load shedding is expected to continue for much of 2024, and that certainly adds to a lot of the business woes and the growth outlook for the economy and the potential growth outlook for the economy. I think another supply side constraint to growth that's really come under the magnifying glass in recent months is in the transport logistics sector. We've had underperformance and inefficiencies in the rail sector, but particularly the ports. While we know they've been costly and quite inefficient, we've had huge backlogs, etc. And certainly some of the additional ships that have been calling on our ports with what's been happening in the Red Sea, the attacks on tankers there, has added additional pressure, at least on the logistics side. So just from a supply side and ultimately production side perspective, those challenges will continue and will impact business in 2024.
Overall government finances are under pressure, threatening to further increase government debt. Contingent liabilities and bailouts at state-owned companies, as well as the public sector wage bill, pose a risk to government finances.
The spending pressures, even without the election year that we have, are manifold. One of them obviously continues to be, the social wage, but increasingly also, the spending on social grants. About 27 million people are dependent, on some form of grant in South Africa. So that perhaps is one element. I think another big contested element, at least, was the public sector wage bill, and I don't see that pressure reducing anytime soon. Another part is the bailouts that we have been seeing for SOEs, and we know that the challenges at a number of our SOEs linked to the supply side constraints I've mentioned continue to persist.
Government has announced plans to raise an additional 15 billion rand in taxes, but experts say raising taxes could be counterproductive and squeeze individuals and corporates even further.
Money is to push up the VAT rate. That's highly unlikely to happen in an election year, in my view. If ever, possibly we talk about the NHI, given that the NHI is very much a social initiative. Possibly it could be seen to justify in the future, an increase in the VAT rate, because it's essentially, one way of moving the dial very quickly. But I certainly don't foresee that happening anytime soon. So I think what we'll be seeing is a continued focus on enforcement. I really don't think we'll be seeing significant, and I mean, as I said earlier, the 15 billion referred to in the medium-term budget policy speech is a smallish number, and that's what was referred to as the potential tax rate or the extra revenue from an increase.
Economists expect government debt to rise to about 80% of GDP over the medium term. Debt service costs is seen peaking at about 20% of revenue. Gloria Sefako Musi, SABC News, Johannesburg.